I must say it's such a blessing to be here in front of so many Christians from different parts of the world. Now, before we officially begin, I would just like us to appreciate the diversity that is here. So please, if you may, turn to your neighbor, give them a big smile, and in your own language or dialect, tell them, this is where the Lord wants you to be. So I will do that in Swahili, you'll do it in your own. Hapa ndio Yesu anataka ukue.
This is where the Lord wants you to be.
Welcome to the second session. My name is John Jusu. I'm from Sierra Leone, raised in Kenya. I work with the Association of Evangelicals in Africa, and I am one of your MCs for today.
And I'm Pirong Lin. You have met me yesterday. I am from Singapore. I live in Germany, and I work with the World Evangelical Alliance.
Great. So, Pering, why are we here today?
Why are we here today?
Yes.
We just watched the video on Here I Am, Lord, Send Me. We are going to rethink missions. So the reason why we are rethinking missions is because we are in a new landscape. Any idea what that means, a new landscape?
If I can put it in practical sense, yes, and contextualize it, let's say I come from the village. My village, it's an African village, straw roof, mud hut, dirt road with livestock everywhere. And all of a sudden, you're plucked from that village and placed into a bustling city of New York. Big skyscrapers, screens on the roof, cars and traffic everywhere. So that's what I would understand by a new landscape. Yeah?
Yep, something that's completely different, something that requires us to rethink how we operate. And we've done missions in the last many years in a certain way. And now that we are post-COVID with lots of disruption, artificial intelligence, and all sorts of different things, we want to rethink missions.
Yes. So in light of that, we would like to invite the first speaker with the topic on rethinking missions. So he currently serves as the Theological Commission Coordinator of the World Evangelical Alliance and as the Theological Education Network Coordinator of Tear Fund UK in East and Southeast Asia. He is an author, and he writes books in mixed languages, with one winning the Filipino Reader's Choice Awards, titled Boring Ba Ang Bible Mo, which in translation means, is the Bible boring? So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in putting your hands together to welcome Pastor Ray Crizaldo.
Okay, it's me again, but I want to tell you about my grandfather. My grandfather was an evangelist. Like the Apostle Paul, he did not marry so he can devote his time and his life for the sake of the gospel. I remember when I was a child, he would have two things that is very close to his heart. One is his motorcycle, which serves as his ride as he go around the town telling people about Jesus. My grandfather believed with his whole heart that Jesus alone can change people's lives for the better. Then he has his notebook with a long list of names. Names of people he has encountered, shared the good news, and repeatedly engage so that they will accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. As a child, it looked to me like the book of life described in the Apocalypse of John. Every night, he will pray for those names one by one. For those who were born again, that they will continue to mature in their faith. For those who haven't yet, that they will one day surrender their lives to Christ. And for those who have forsaken the faith, that once more they will return to the loving embrace of the Father. And for quite a while, this vivid image is what I have of a life that is fully devoted to the cause of mission. Then I also have a grandmother. She was not an evangelist like my grandfather. She was an entrepreneur who raised two kids whom she sent to college as a single mother. While my grandfather mastered the Bible, she specialized in business. I remember when I was a child, day by day, my grandmother would hustle in the market selling mangoes, everything that she can sell, trying to crack the secret of what it takes to make money. She was convinced that the only way she can help others is by making sure that she can help herself and help herself really well, that she would have enough to spare and to share with other people. But unlike my grandfather, she did not keep a notebook. She didn't have a long list of names who borrowed money from her. She gave as she is able to do to whoever is in need. You know, as a child, I remember it looked to me that my grandmother was refashioning her life after the story of the feeding of the 5,000, whom Jesus refused to send home away with an empty stomach. But it will take me quite a while to understand that my grandmother's life is in itself a vivid image of what it means to do mission. I did study theology, but it did not so much help me to realize that giving a glass of water is also an indispensable part of sharing the gospel. You may wonder why. It is not that theology in itself is unhelpful, otherwise, I would run away from the theological commission of the WEA. But I realized that it is a certain kind of mission theology that restricted my peripheral vision. John Stott identified it as the great reversal among the conservative side of the Protestants. Ron Sider calls it as the uneasy conscience of evangelical Christianity. Or more recently, Richard Stearns spoke of the hole in the gospel. But what helped me the most to see the real face of the problem is what Carlos Rene Padilla, an evangelical theologian from Ecuador, whom I met exactly a decade ago. He described a kind of mission that is mutilada, or in English, mutilated. Okay? A kind of mission that has been so refined that in the process, it loses much of its essential ingredients. Just like a refined sugar or the bread made from refined flour, it may be tasty, but for sure, it is already lacking the things that can make it healthy. Likewise, mission can be so mutilated that it hardly resembles the multifaceted character of Jesus' ministry. Or it can be so refined, laser-focused refined, that it neglects the one thing that Peter, James, and John reminded Apostle Paul when he was reconfiguring what it means to do missions to the non-Jews. Remember that story in Acts? That they told the good apostle that he should continue to remember the poor. And that you can read in Galatians chapter 2, verse 9 to 10. As an alternative to mutilada mission or mission mutilada, Padilla spoke of mission that is complete, not missing anything, not missing an essential component. In Spanish, he calls it Misión Integral, after a familiar bread among his people, which they call as pan integral, or whole wheat bread, which he himself bakes at home. This he does as the necessary response to the specific context and need of Latin America at that time. As campus workers doing student ministry, together with Samuel Escobar and Pedro Arana, they could not possibly dismiss the deep questions of poverty, injustice, and oppression that were deeply probed and discussed in the universities of Latin America. They need to give their young people a vision that is as compelling, if not even more convincing, than the promise of an armed revolution. What they did in Latin America was mine the Bible for the breadth and for the depth of what it means to follow Jesus in the most difficult conditions of their nation. And the Word of God led them to rediscover the revolutionary edge of the gospel. So radical that it exposes how mutilated mission has been in the Christianity of the Western world, and how it would be so out of context for them to continue adopting that paradigm of mission. Today, Mission Integral has been embraced more and more by evangelicals globally. Sometimes translated as integral mission, sometimes as holistic transformation. And it has been a tragedy. Yes, a really sad tragedy. Mission Integral could have been an invitation for other regions of the world to reimagine missions as demanded by the very specific contours of their respective contexts. But what started as a really solid example of local or context-rooted way of doing missions has been globalized, or should I say, hijacked into the mold of Western-oriented missiology. You see, integrate in English can mean so differently from integral in Spanish. Integrate can be used in the sense of fusing things together that were otherwise taken apart, like, for example, evangelism and social action, or proclamation and demonstration. But integrating two things does not necessarily equate to being whole. You can integrate things together and still be missing something that is very essential. And so the whole debate in the past 2 decades or so about whether political engagement or creation care should be part of mission of the church actually missed the bigger picture. The question rather is, what else, aside from these two, that shall make our grasp of mission even more whole and complete? Is beautiful poetry mission? How about health-conscious culinary? Or responsible artificial intelligence? For sure, there is more to mission than water, gender, and fair trade coffee, no matter how dear coffee is to me. But there cannot be mission without all these, because the gospel best comes across as good news when it confronts the composite dilemma of human existence, social ills, and historical evils. Jesus was good news to the Samaritan woman, to Nicodemus, and to the Gerasene demoniac. But he was bad news. Bad news to the Sanhedrin, to Herod, and eventually to the Roman Empire. So terrible a news that the people who are called by his name were put in jail, fed to the lions, and burned as torches in the Colosseum of Rome. They were caught defying Caesar's decree by saying that there is another king, the one called Jesus. Acts chapter 17, verse 7. Someone once said, well, if everything is mission, then nothing is mission. But I think this is an unfortunate case of mixing categories. What do I mean? It is like asking, is violet delicious? Are roses compassionate? Are elephants short-circuiting? Do you get my point? For how can mission not be about a lot of different things if God is in the work of reconciling all things back to himself and accomplished through the peace of the cross of Christ? And we read that in Colossians chapter 1, verse 19 to 20. And so this means that shalom is coming not only to people, but to the entire planet. Beasts, rivers, and trees included. And all the rest of what Apostle Paul called things invisible. But we don't have much time to explore the things invisible. But if that is so, then let us push the envelope further, as we might still be missing something important. Bishop Wayong of Malaysia often issued a reminder that one of the unfortunate impacts of having Christianity being molded in the worldview of Western enlightenment is being blind to the supernatural realm that is very much part of the world we inhabit. And he is saying, unless we are able to shake off this deficient worldview, our mission will not gain traction in most parts of the world that remains to be attuned to the reality of the spirit world. To this day, Christianity remains to be a tiny fraction of the population in Asia. Always 1% or less than 10% in Asia. I will not forget a trek to the mountains that I had when I was traveling a few months ago in Chiang Rai, in northern Thailand. The driver was telling me how interested he is in many religions. But what he found most fascinating, he said, is Christianity. And I asked why. And I could still hear his words as I speak now. He said, you see, Christianity has been here in Thailand for more than 100 years. And yet, the number of Christians remains to be less than 1% of the population. There must be something wrong in how you do in Christianity in this country. So, what am I saying here? There is a clear and present danger when we fail to undo the single story of how to do missions. A hegemonic narrative that leaves very little space to the likes of my grandmother. But Rene Padilla and his Latin American friends have shown us what it takes to do a decolonial approach to mission. Likewise, how can we, in our time today, encourage the crafting of multiple stories of doing mission that is rooted in the specifics of different cultures, languages, and contexts? How can we undo the logic of copy-paste missiology in the new landscape of the re-emerging centers of Christianity in the majority world? Thank you so much.